Is Ramona Remble, principal at Westdale Middle School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, facing some pretty heavy rains right now. So it's very nice of you to join us.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Hope everyone is staying safe, and hopefully the rains move on. But
Yes.
we have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. Maybe we could just start with, as principal, what led you and your team to say, we really want to implement a school-wide, positive behavior system, and we want to put all that hard work into it.
Well, I became interim principal here March 6th of last school year. You know how late that is in the school year, but it did give me a unique opportunity to see what was working, what was lacking, and if I had become the permanent principal, what I would do differently for the following school year. I was named the actual principal in June. Thank you very much.
Congrats.
And I had already started the work of because coming that late in the spring, it was all I could do was continue to see forward the mission and the vision of the previous principal and
Mm.
do some observations. So one of the things that I definitely observed was we had serious issues when it came to student misbehavior, high suspension rate, high expulsion rate, and teacher morale was really low. And when I
Mm.
surveyed the students, when I surveyed the teacher population, the leadership team, um, what I kept hearing over and over was that discipline was a major issue, and teachers were burnt out because it felt like they were managing. The most eye-opening thing that I got though was when it came to the student survey. When I asked them what they wanted from me, the overwhelming response was stronger discipline.
Mm.
That was very eye-opening to me. Um, Everyone was craving more structure, more disciplinary support. So this is my first time venturing into middle school. I've worked in high school for 15 years,
Mm.
and I had been an assistant principal for 8 years prior to this. And one of the things that we used to do at the previous high school where I spent 9 years of my career, we would track what was called the ABCs, attendance, behavior, course performance.
Mm.
And it was the foundation of our PBIS system at the school. And I felt like that was something that was really needed here. We had a huge number of students that had been held back at the end of last school year due to attendance. It was abysmal. Um, Behavior was a huge issue. And we also had a lot of students who, they behaved well and they felt that they were losing privileges because the good was suffering for the bad. So this summer, I ventured out to try to find a system that would help us to track and monitor these ABCs, help us to develop some incentives around positive behavior incentive support because I know how important that is to a school system. So brought the idea to my leadership team, and it was kind of like, okay, let's divide and conquer. Let's all put our feelers out and see what we can find that can
Mm.
provide these things. Um, I think LiveSchool was brought to my attention via maybe some marketing emails. I know that when I saw the initial presentation of it, it was intriguing to me. I wanted to see more about what it was. And I didn't get the opportunity to really delve into it at the time. So I asked our dean to check it out, Coach Romero, who couldn't be in this podcast today, but she's amazing. And she is actually our direct administrator of LiveSchool here. So she checked it out and she came to me and she's like, Ms. Rumble, this is amazing. I think it's going to do everything that it is that we need it to do, which caused me to take the time to really look into it. We loved how everything was set up with the house system and the built-in incentives where teachers could provide points to students and this whole thing. So the initial concept was let's see what it does. Let's see how this impacts school. So initially, I reached out to our Title I coordinator. I'm like, hey, can we get some funds? Can we get this rolling? And it was kind of new to the district. I even had to get like the superintendent to sign off on it. And I
Mm.
realized, hey, this is something kind of new. But anyone who knows me knows, like, I come from a school that was like the king of pilots. We piloted a lot of stuff that actually is now widely used in the district. So I wasn't afraid of trying something new. So we get LiveSchool. We really get into it in July. And when we start bringing the teachers back for in-service before school starts, Coach Romero had the idea of, so initially we were trying to figure out like how we're going to do it. Are we going to do it by grade level?
Mm.
How are we going to do this? And she came up with the idea of, okay, we have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. let's do 6 houses and let's make them diverse. Our campus is very diverse. We have a middle school that probably has more programs than most middle schools. There's something here for everybody. We have a foreign language immersion magnet program. We have gifted, we have talented, we have our traditional students, we have an ESS population, we have an ED population, we have so many different populations here. And she wanted those houses to be reflective of the diversity of the populations. So she decided for the 6 houses, we kind of came to a consensus that we would mix them up 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and we would do a variety of teachers and students, and they would be in these houses. So initially we were like, how do we roll this concept out to the teachers and have it be something that they don't see as, oh, another thing to do, right?
Mm.
And how do we get them to see the value in this? So in our in-service, we didn't just go straight into, this is the school calendar and this is what we're going to do instructionally. We started with that in mind, the cultural piece and talking about our vision and how LiveSchool would play a part of that. So once they started to kind of get interested in like, what's this whole LiveSchool jazz? Coach Romero did this really neat thing where every teacher had a balloon with their name on it. And it wasn't just the teachers, it was every member of the leadership team also.
Mm.
I am the only person who belonged to all 6 houses, but
Nice.
every single person, our assistant principals, deans, literacy coach, math coach, all of them were given a house. And inside of these balloons was the house color that they belonged to. So we did this whole
Mm.
thing. We videoed it, everybody like popping their balloons to see what house color they had. And at that moment, it was kind of camaraderie with the teachers. Like, hey, I'm in the pink house. Who else is in the pink house with me?
Mm. Yeah.
So we kind of started with getting them pumped about this. Then when school started, we started school with a pep rally. That was Coach Romero's
Nice.
idea,
Love
and
that.
it was unique because most people don't do that on the first day of school.
Yeah.
But we wanted to kind of really pump up our vision and school spirit on day one.
Mm.
So we told them like, hey, we've got this awesome incentive system. This year, we promise you will get recognized and rewarded for doing the right things. And,
Mm.
we believe that you can meet these expectations. So the initial house party is what we call them, initial house party. Um, all students knew what house they belonged in, but they
Mm.
didn't know who else was in their house. So
Oh.
Coach Romero did this big pep rally style thing,
Mhm.
where the kids got the opportunity to see who was in their house by letting them represent with their house colors. And that was pretty cool. Like the kids really, really, really seemed to like that, being able to identify which of their peers and teachers were in their house.
Mm.
We gave them opportunity to even get their houses names and kind of create their own vision as a house and really take ownership of it. So Coach Romero came up with the idea of having the houses compete in attendance, behavior, course
Mm.
performance. Those houses would get that shout out on the announcements and also be able to rep their house color, And we're a school that uses uniforms. So anytime students get to dress outside of uniforms, they're thrilled. They love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my biggest thing was I want them to take ownership and have pride in their houses. So we come up with these house parties, right?
Yeah.
And the kids absolutely love them. I get stopped like on the corridors. It's like, hey, when's our next house party? So with the house parties, we do what's like grade level Olympics. So it's a little combination of silly games and
Mhm.
academic trivia type thing. They get to really be proud of their house. We can discuss with them which house is leading in the ABCs. They can get that spirit stick, and now everybody knows who's the house to beat for next time around.
Nice.
And also to students, we've tied LiveSchool into our on-campus currency. Our mascot is the hawk, so we have a campus currency, the Hawks Bucks. And one day a week on Wednesdays, you can use Hawks Bucks at the concession stand to purchase concessions, right?
Mhm.
But the only way to earn Hawks Bucks is based on our point system with LiveSchool. So
Mm.
students get points for all the things that we expect of them: being in class on time, being prepared with their materials, being respectful, all of the things that we want to see. And what we found is by putting a lot of energy and focus on positive behaviors, the negative behaviors have drastically lessened. When I first came here, it felt like all the focus was on negative behaviors, and student behavior was like 90% of what was going on.
Mm.
When I surveyed my instructional team, I'm like, what is it that you want to do during the day? And they had all these wonderful ideas. And I'm like, what's stopping you from doing it? And everything was discipline. We spent so much time
Mm.
monitoring behaviors, discipline. So not everybody was sold on the idea that if we shifted our focus to positive behavior and incentives, that it would address these negative behaviors. Not everybody was on it. But the data spoke for itself. As we started to see, like the kids they're striving because there's something to strive towards, and there's a reward there. And then we tied it into other school-wide things. Coach Romero wanted to do a fall festival and trunk or treat, and students had to have, certain. There were these parameters. You couldn't have, referrals. You couldn't have suspensions. You couldn't do these things, and a huge, like, I'm going to say more than 80% of our students were able to participate in that because they met those metrics. And she and I had a conversation, and she was like, if we had done this time last year, probably only a third of the kids would have qualified.
Mm.
So it's showing that
Hmm.
students are responding positively to it.
Yeah.
Um, and it has made a huge impact on our school culture here. I think the number one most asked question from students to me is, when's our next house party? So,
That's
yeah,
gotta feel great.
it
And
does.
it's so interesting hearing how you approached it. Can I ask, is this your first principalship
It
or
is. It
it
is.
is?
It's my first principalship. I was an AP for 8 years, and then this is my first
Okay,
principalship.
that's really exciting. A lot of times when people are rolling out a new school-wide program, and at LiveSchool, we actually advise people to do this. We'll kind of say, like, start small, get everyone on board, start small. You all went big.
We went big.
From the very beginning. It was just go, go, go the first week. I love it.
I love it too because so me coming in as an outsider, in our system, elementary, middle, and high school is like pretty segregated. So when I came here, everyone was like, "Who's this lady?" They had to call somebody in the high school realm, like, "Do you know this person?" So getting them to buy in fully, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that the leadership team was like, "Hey, we're going to give it a good old college try." When I first became principal, everybody told me, it's going to take about 3 years for you to really see change. Pick 2 or 3 things that you can change and focus on this year.
Yeah.
But when I was looking last school year, there were 15 teachers that quit during the school year here.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
recognized that we did not have 3 years to turn things around. That
Mm.
sense of urgency was so necessary. We were losing very competent and passionate teachers. We were allowing this love of education to the flame to just go out. And I
Mm.
recognized that we didn't have time to do that. We needed to do a total transformation in the 8 weeks of summer and come back and hit it hard. So, having that team, how it was described to me by one of our leadership team members was, we were always on the bus. We just needed a bus driver. And I said, well, I
Mm.
just hopped in. I was like, I got my CDL. Let's do it. So
And hit the
they,
gas
yeah, I'm telling
too.
you, and they
Yeah.
brought into the fact that we needed to have that sense of urgency, and we needed to not change 2 or 3 things. We needed to hit about 12 things, and we
Mm.
needed to really do it effectively and with fidelity. And I will say that I'm very proud that we did that. We really
Yeah.
did what we were supposed to do. And one of my supervisors asked Coach Romero one day, like, what are you most proud of this school year? And she said, that we did what we said we were going to do. Every year we plan a bunch of stuff and we don't necessarily follow it through, but this year we
Mm.
did.
Yeah.
And very excited with LiveSchool. It has had such an impact on just the positive nature of the culture, but numerically, when we get into suspensions and we get into expulsions, when we get into attendance, it is completely night and day from last year. And like last year, first semester, I think we had like 133 children who met the definition for truant. And this year, first semester, at the end of the semester, we only have 4. Like that's huge.
That's amazing.
It
Well,
is.
I mean, when they hear from their friends, like, first day, you missed the pep rally,
Yes,
and, like, kids wanna be there for that
they
stuff.
do. I
Yeah.
had it's so funny. So we had a house party coming up like on a Friday,
Mhm.
and we had a kid that was sick. And the nurse was like, "Hey, you're gonna have to take off." And she comes in here, she's got these tears in her eyes, and she's like, "Miss Remble, tell them I'm not sick." And I'm looking at her, I'm like, "Well, you look sick." And the medical professional said, "You're sick, like, baby, take you a break." And I remember what it was like to be a kid. If you get your free
Yeah.
day off, a 3-day weekend, who would argue with that? But she was upset because she didn't want to miss the house party.
That's a sign of
You
victory
know,
for your
that's it's,
team
it's a
for
big deal.
sure. Yeah, that is a big deal. It sounds like you also have a mix of kinda the more tangibles and then these experiences and ways that kids are connecting to staff and others. Like, do you find that some students really are all about the tangible stuff and some or is it all a mix and everyone's enjoying everything?
That's a very good question. I do think that within the diversity of the population, you're going to find diverse needs. There's a diversity in what encourages students or
Right,
what
right.
excites them. We have some students that are more about the instant gratification. So I'll give you an example. We have a menu of the things that you can do with your Hawks bucks based
Mhm.
upon your points. One of them is you can save up enough to get a free dress, right?
Mm.
So you can dress in your regular clothes. And that was like the pinnacle. And we just knew that the kids were going to save up and do this. No one has cashed yours in for free dress because they go to the concession stand and use it every Wednesday because of that instant gratification. And we were just
Yep.
kind of laughing about that. We were like, it kind of shocked us because we thought everybody's going to be like, let me save up for my free dress. But we do have their kids, right? So
Yeah, of
they're
course.
like,
Yeah.
that might be on their mind. And then they look over there and they're like, they got some pickles and some chips and, I'm going to spend it.
Yeah.
And then we do have those students who, they prefer, just being able to have like their teams, their houses shouted out on the intercom.
Mm.
We have some students that have expressed to me that they love that recognition, um, and that positive competition, being able to represent their house colors, those type of things. So I do think it is a combination of both
Hmm.
the tangibles and
Yeah.
intangibles, and I think that's why we did tie it into our Hawks Bucks currency system because we did find that some students were more motivated by the tangible reward.
Yeah. And also, I mean, students having that experience, like, maybe the first couple weeks or first couple months, yeah, they're going for the instant gratification, but that also gives them the opportunity to start to reflect and learn, like, oh, I still haven't, you know what I mean? And they can start to develop those decision making skills. So I think that's really great to give them the choice and let them learn some of those lessons in a real way. Have you been hearing anything from like parents in the community? Are they hearing about all everything going on?
So, the parents absolutely love that, they can kind of get a snapshot of where their students stand
Mm,
with our live school system. I have not gotten a ton of feedback from
mhm,
parents specifically about live school. But because maybe we have not done the best job of explaining to parents um, the how we're getting
mm,
the improvements and gains. But the one thing I do know is our parents and our other stakeholders, like even people who work throughout the district, what they have been commenting on is God, when we come here, it just feels different. When we come here,
mm,
it is so different. And the kids are, for example, one of the things we had a serious issue with when I got here was during instructional time, there would always be kids just kind of walking around, meandering, doing things. And I told my leadership team, like, it drives me nuts. I said, whatever our core foundation is, like what our core beliefs are,
mm,
we shouldn't have to tell anybody. They should see it. And me being
mm,
all about instruction, I must model that by making sure instructional time is protected. So from bell to bell, no one moves. Period. I want people in class all the time. And when I'm having people come on campus, I literally had someone just stop and ask the magna coordinator, like, where are the kids? And she's like, well, they're in class. And she's like, all of them? Yeah. She's like, like that wasn't what I heard about this school. She's like, yeah, I mean, a lot of things have changed. And I get so many people who just comment on that. And people who've worked in the district in different capacities. who have way more experience being at this school than I have are like, hey, I've been coming to this school for years. It is different. It's changed something about just the feeling.
Mm,
And like I said, they may not necessarily understand the logistics behind how we're getting that change, but they are definitely recognizing and acknowledging the change. Um, our campus is pretty large and it's very open. And one day I needed to get something to the back of campus, and I was at the front of campus. I said, well, I'll catch a kid, and when a kid comes, I'll get them to run it back there. So I'm standing there. Time is going. It's like 15 minutes, and I turn and I tell the math coach, I'm like, it's been 15 minutes, and like no kid has passed by, and she's like, yeah, they're all in class, like
it's
they've
working.
they've they've
Yeah.
bought they've bought in to what we expect here. Um, I'm also finding that with LiveSchool and with our students understanding that they will get incentives for doing the right thing, it seems to be more of a push of doing the right thing. So, um, cell phones was a huge issue when I came here, as they are at most schools, right?
Of course. Yeah.
And so I came up with this summer. I told my leadership team, I'm going to have students to relinquish their cell phones when they walk into class and they can get them back at the end of class. And everybody looked at me like I was nuts. They were like, oh my God, that is not going to go over well. Kids are going to be combative. They're going to be aggressive about those phones. Um, I think it's going to be very difficult. However, we have not had any issues there. And it is,
Mm,
they're allowed to use their phones at lunch and at recess only. And so far, we haven't had any problems there. The kids are in the habit of they give
mm,
phones, and it's because they're being engaged in class and they
mm.
have a motivation to stay on task and do well because they know it will be recognized and rewarded. And so we're seeing less of a need for distraction, with the cell phones and other behaviors in class. The kids all just seem to be really into it, physically and mentally into it. And that's what I love.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that's literally what it's all about. And you can't fake like yeah, if you had just made a mandate on that, you know what I mean? That's a very different situation than giving kids an alternative every day in every class where they're you know what I mean? They're like, "Ah, yeah, I'll put my phone up." And I think on some level, kids probably like not having that you know what I mean? It's probably nice to step away from their phones and, like, socialize and learn and focus, right?
Well, I think it was something that was kind of very unfamiliar
Yeah,
and weird at first.
right.
And I recognized that in order for me to get students to step out and do something that is foreign to them, they had to trust me.
Mm,
So one of the things I started my first week here, even as an interim principal, was grade level meetings. And in my experience as an educator, grade level meetings are usually teams of grade level teachers meeting.
of course, yeah.
I do grade level meetings, and it's me, the teacher, and that grade level of students. I'm addressing the students, right? And the teachers are there to overhear the conversation I'm having with students, and we do that every single month. And in addition to me speaking to them about things that are germane to the time, it may be testing coming up, and I'm just trying to motivate them to stay with it, or it could be something specific to a pattern I'm seeing that we need to reset.
Mhm.
um, but also I give them the opportunity to Q&A. So it's two-way, they get to ask me questions and they get to make suggestions, and we go back and forth that way. And what I found is just bringing them in and having these conversations and say, hey, we're going to do it this way, and this is the why. This is my thought behind it.
Mm,
And I found that just having those, just we're on the same level
yeah.
conversations, has garnered a lot of trust from our students. We had to do accreditation surveys, and the surveys, they have a survey for parents, they have a survey for staff, and they have one for students. And when it came to the highest ranked metric from our students was a Likert scale statement that said, my principal makes decisions in our best interest and to keep us safe. And that was on like an
That's so
88 question
awesome.
survey. So I think that even if I ask them to do something that is maybe uncomfortable at first, or
Yeah.
they're not, used to it, they trust that I will make decisions that are best for them, and that I will do them to make them safe. And then by having those grade level meetings, it allows them to address concerns to me. And
Mm,
it allows me to know what they're thinking or what misconceptions they may have. And then I can stop and I can explain it to them. Um, because kids nowadays, I mean, they're very advanced and they're
yeah,
critical thinkers. These kids are very able to understand the concepts and the reasoning behind. So taking the time to say, "Hey, I understand your concern, but this is what I was thinking when I did that." It has made a huge difference in getting our students to try something new.
mm,
And I do think that they're enjoying not having the phones. I don't even think they think about it. They're just so engaged in class and they're doing stuff. The teachers are loving it because the kids are now fully engaged in the work. And our first semester assessment data was like huge gains from previous years because now
yeah.
the students are focused on what's going on in class and they know that being on top of it, pulling out their materials and staying with like they're going to get points in live school, and those points
Yeah.
actually turn into other incentives. So yeah.
How did you develop your leadership style? I'm really curious.
So that's a very good question. I actually, so even as a kid, I was always told that I was going to be a teacher. And I was like, no, I don't have the patience for that. I'm going to be a scientist and I'm not going to be a teacher. But I was told that my whole life I'd be a teacher. Even in like my first grade class, my teacher would allow me to work with groups of students. And we ended up being assistant principals together at the same school, believe it or
Really?
not.
Wow.
Yeah. And he would tell everybody, I always knew she would be a teacher. But I was also, so there was something naturally in me. However, I believe that my specific style, it is a conglomerate of all the leaders that I've served under,
Mm,
whether it was in my teaching capacity, when I was an instructional specialist, or when I was an assistant principal. As an assistant principal, I served under five principals during my tenure as an assistant principal. And every last one of them had some traits that kind of I was able to take, and I'd say, you know what? When I become a principal, I'm gonna do that, you know. And I'll be me being the assistant principal, I would kind of have more boots on the ground and get to see how the decisions they made and their style impacted the teachers and students at the school. So I was able to kind of take a little bit from each one.
mm,
And also too, I've always had mentors. I've had mentors from the moment I became a teacher. And those mentors also helped to shape my leadership style. So part of it is just my natural personality.
yeah.
And part of it is a combination of just learning. You know,
Mm,
our goal of education is to create lifelong learners and students. And
mm,
so we have to model that by being willing to learn from every experience and every person around us. And I'm constantly doing that. So.
yeah. I have a couple bigger picture questions as we wrap up. One is just what connection you see between behavior and academics. You've talked about it a lot in your school, but could you just share some of your philosophy on it?
Oh, yes. So, there's always this philosophical battle. You have group A that believes that instruction cannot occur as long as you haven't set the foundation of structure and behavior. And then you have group B that argues that if instruction is engaging and solid enough, behavior will take care of itself, right? So, um, I am kind of in this group C, this gray area, where I definitely believe that in solid instruction and engagement and remembering that you don't teach subject matter, you teach people. So tailoring your instruction to learning styles and learning needs and the specifics of the people who are sitting in your classroom, I believe that that is the key to maintaining um, positive behavior within the school setting. However, I do believe that the initial foundation for instruction has to be a set of behavioral norms because so when we tier our teachers based upon interventions and support and coaching, we have two separate tiers. We tier them on instruction and then we tier them on culture and behavior. Because you can have a teacher that is really, really solid in content knowledge and could create these awesome plans for engaging instruction. But if they can't get the children to remain seated in mind and hook their attention and the student behavior is all over the place, that awesome plan will never come to fruition. Right. And then you can have students who are well managed naturally and behave. But if you're boring them and you're not teaching to their needs, you're going to lose those kids also. So I definitely feel that behavior cannot be ignored. It the environment for which we teach and the foundation that instruction has to lay on has to we can't ignore the need for students to be well behaved. Okay.
Mm,
So and then we have a lot of students. We have some students that actually have behavioral disorders and
sure, yeah.
emotional disorders and these things. So I definitely believe that behavior is a huge part of how effective instruction will be. Long are the days where students came in and just were quiet and got their lesson. We don't have that anymore. We have a generation of students who were taught to question and taught to think,
Mm,
and they will challenge you.
mm,
So behavior, I think, within the last, especially 10 years, has become a huge deal. It has become a huge topic. And unfortunately, it has a lot to do with teacher shortages all over our country.
mhm,
Most teachers, contrary to popular belief, are not quitting the profession because of pay. Educators were never paid very much. That wasn't what we got into it for. A lot of them are leaving because they can't handle the
mm,
behaviors that we're starting to see within the school and
yeah.
are becoming more common. So definitely, I feel like I've never seen a school be an A school and have huge suspension, expulsion rate, and behavior issues. It
Yeah.
just it doesn't happen that way. So I definitely feel that behavior plays a huge role in instruction, and without having students have those, meeting those norms and those expectations for behavior, I do believe that instruction will always fall short.
All right, let's hit another hot button debate. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. I'm really curious your philosophy on this. How do you see the two? And maybe you hit this when you were rolling out live school, but a lot of teachers feel like, hey, students should just be intrinsically, these are behaviors they should be doing. We should not be recognizing and rewarding students for lining up quietly, taking out their notebook, right? These basic, being respectful. And then, so where do you fall on that? How do you see this big issue?
I was raised in a very old school fashion, right? And it was, you do what you're supposed to do because you're supposed to do it,
Hmm.
and your character is defined by the things you do when no one is looking. So I struggled with this intrinsic versus extrinsic thing for a long time. I typically taught students who came from underprivileged areas, and a lot of them, just from getting to know my students, I recognized lacked intrinsic motivation
Mm.
for a variety of reasons. Okay, for a variety of reasons. And when I was the same way. You go to school, you do what you're supposed to do. That's a parent's issue. Why do we have to jump through hoops to try to engage kids to do what they're supposed to do anyway? But I recognize just human nature. In human nature, we like to be recognized and we like to be rewarded for our effort, whether we're children or adults, right?
Hmm.
And even if you're the most intrinsically motivated person, without some extrinsic motivation, oftentimes that intrinsic motivation will die. Everyone needs extrinsic motivation to some degree. It is a range. Some people need more than others.
Mm.
So, prime example, if you are raised in a two-parent home with lots of attention and affection and love, and people who are putting into you every day how
Mm.
special and unique and important you are, those type of things really garner strong intrinsic motivation. But the truth is, a large percentage of our population, they're not getting that,
Mm.
for one reason or another, whether it's a parent is working a whole lot and the kid's not getting a lot of attention, all the way to the fact that we have students in transition who are either homeless or living in group home settings or in foster home settings. Those children, unfortunately, did not get those things to help build strong intrinsic motivation. And I found that the key to building intrinsic motivation when it is lacking, it starts with extrinsic motivation.
Mm.
If you start extrinsically, children will learn to build intrinsic motivation.
Mm,
I can't tell you how many children at the high school level I've worked with who, when having one-on-one talks about like, hey, why aren't you putting forth any effort? Why do you barely come to school? So many of them, their response was, well, nobody cares.
mm.
And you recognize that this child is lacking intrinsic motivation because that extrinsic motivation, which is the start of every motivation, we all start off
I need
with
some food.
without that. I mean,
Yeah.
we start off with other people either building us up or tearing us down, right?
Mm,
And we know that from birth, babies who don't get that initial contact and that initial love, they typically deal with, these attachment disorders and these other things. All of that care and concern and love that we get from childhood, from early childhood, impacts how we develop. And it all starts with extrinsic motivation. Whether you're old school and your extrinsic motivation was, if I don't do what I'm supposed to do in school, my mom's going to spank me or punish me,
yep.
or it's just having people motivate you. It's all extrinsic, and it does eventually convert into intrinsic motivation. And so it's really hard to sell people on that, though,
Yeah,
especially if
it
they've
is.
been
Yeah.
doing this a long time. But I'm gonna tell you one thing that I do think helped by having our teachers in a house, right? Not only when the house wins, not only do the students get PBIS, so do the adults.
Mm.
So our adults are hearing their names being on the announcement. When they are getting, teacher of the month recognition, when they're getting recognitions, they realize it feels
They're like,
really
"Oh, this is
good.
kind of fun. Yeah,
It
this is fun."
feels
Yeah,
really good.
yeah.
And to have a principal that says, I'm not like, well, you get paid to do this job. You should come
Right.
to work every day and you should do these things. To be recognized for your efforts. They realize it feels good. So I feel like sometimes, in most times, showing is better than telling. When we set out as a leadership team to put the teachers in the house and to recognize them and reward them as their house works, it wins, um, that was intentional.
Mm,
And we're noticing that some of those teachers who was not real big fans of extrinsic motivation, because they've experienced how good it feels and how motivating it is, we're winning them over. And that was a big deal because we did have several teachers on our campus who were not using LiveSchool. They just wouldn't use it.
mm,
Um, and then you had some that were using it every day effectively, and they were, speaking about how important the differences it made within the classroom culture. And then you had some that just were like, no, I'm not rewarding them for doing stuff that they're supposed to do.
mhm.
But then when
Right.
they saw how good it felt, they decided that they wanted to do that. And actually, we are looking into developing a complete teacher PBI system for next year
Mm,
tied into LiveSchool, because all of our incentives right now are really student centered. It's about
sure.
what students
Yeah.
want. And then we started thinking about, well, what are some stuff that teachers want? Whether it's a 15-minute chair massage, where like, lunch on the principal
Sounds
level.
nice.
So we're going to actually ramp that up.
Cool.
And I challenge anyone who is dealing with getting the buy-in for the extrinsic motivation for students to develop a PBIS system for the adults on your campus and let
Mm,
them experience how good it feels to be recognized for your hard work and effort, even if you're supposed to be doing it anyway.
hmm.
And once they feel that, it's infectious, and they kind of they recognize that it is important and it does feel good, and you can win them over to give more support to the extrinsic
Yeah.
motivation. Yeah.
I really, really enjoy that answer because I think it's just such an eloquent like description of a complex process. You know what I mean? Like it's not so cut and dry, but the idea that when students don't have that intrinsic motivation, you have to find ways to create an environment that helps them develop it, helps them. And anyway, you described it so nicely. I would love to close out with if you had a billboard and you could put up any message that other principals would see on their way to work every day. Um, what message you might want to share that's been important to you as an educator and now a leader?
Ooh, what a deep question that is. Oh, you put me on the spot now. Oh wow. It would probably be summed up in two words. I probably would have I probably would have a billboard with like huge on
Huge.
there, continuous improvement and continuous improvement for all. We put it like that,
Mm,
continuous improvement for all. A lot of times we put a lot of pressure on children to go from here to here. We know how, in the world of standardized testing and letter grades for schools, we want this instant result. And it can be stressful, especially for
mm,
teachers who are under the pressure of making these things happen. I feel like we can take a lot of pressure off ourselves and celebrate small wins if we focus more on continuous improvement, whether that's large gains or just a little. And for everybody, not just for the students, but continuous improvement in the adults. Every single day, I'm trying to get better at every single thing I can, whether it's listening, whether it's self care, whether it's organization. And I feel like a lot of times, educators, we beat ourselves up when we don't necessarily meet the mark that's defined by others.
mm,
And it can be really disheartening when you're working your butts off and then kids don't meet the mark, right?
mm,
But I feel like if we were all to focus on just continuous improvement, whether that's our relationship with others, peers, students, um, cultural practices, whether it's parent communication, just continuously improving, I believe that that will eventually get us to where we're going to be. It'll keep us from burning out, it'll keep us
mm,
balanced, and it's more realistic. And I also feel like it creates hope
mm,
for students who unfortunately may be struggling, or even our students who have certain cognitive disabilities and those
mhm.
things. When we create the mark this high, it is very discouraging for students who are starting really low. But if
Yep.
we can just talk continuous improvement and celebrate the wins, no matter how small they are, I believe that that really, really shifts a culture, um, at the school. And actually, that is the vision I set for this school year, was to foster an environment of continuous improvement for all. And
And
it's
the
been fun.
irony is you've had probably more than just continuous. You've probably had big jumps because of
Yes,
that mindset, right?
they've excelled. And I've seen some students so like tickled with themselves, like, wait a minute, I did this,
Yeah,
they excelled because the expectation, it took the pressure off.
yeah,
Continuous improvement. If you just get a little better every
yeah.
week, and getting the teachers in the mindset of, when you do an assessment this week and a child did not do well on the assessment, giving them that feedback that they need to go back and try to be specific. What the child made a D, but what is it that they would need to do to make a B? And giving
Mm,
them the opportunity to go back and redo it and recover that content and get better. And also encouraging them that next week when we have our quiz, I believe that you're going to do better. Giving them that motivation, that extrinsic motivation.
mm,
And once they experience success, they start to believe in themselves, and that's where that intrinsic motivation really unfolds. So creating that culture all around campus has taken such pressure off the
mm.
teachers and students. I believe that subconsciously it's allowing them to relax in a way that they're performing so much better than they have, just because they're not tense and they're not stressing about
Right.
meeting a mark that may not even be considered an attainable goal to them. Right now they know, hey, Miss Rumble just wants y'all to get a little bit better every
Just a
day.
little bit better.
Just
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit better.
And that's in your control, every day. I think that's a wonderful billboard. And I really just want to compliment you. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I think a lot of times people start small with school systems. And in a lot of cases, I think that's a good way to start. But I think part of what leads leaders to do that is, when you go out and you say, we're going to have, this pep rally schedule and like these rewards and this, you're kind of writing a check. And like it's scary to do that and not know, will we be able to cash that as a team? And so I think what you've done just takes a lot of courage. Maybe you didn't feel it did because
Oh no, I did.
that's how you, okay. But to go out there on the first day and write that check, and then you've just been cashing it, which I think for kids must just feel way different as an experience. And it sounds like it's showing up every day in the hallways and in the classrooms. And so it's really impressive what you and your team have done. I'm sorry your colleagues weren't able to join, but I think you did a really nice job telling the story of what you all are doing. And I can't wait to follow along and see what spring and next year have in store for your kids.
Very excited to continue this partnership. I will tell you though, I did feel the pressure. I recognized that I had written a big check and that
Yeah.
I would lose all credibility if I didn't see to it that it was done. I had a lot of sleep deprivation in the first few weeks of school. Um, I was like, I was dedicated to
Hmm.
making those things happen at all costs because I realized what was on the line. I
Hmm.
realized that I inherited a school with some extremely competent and passionate educators, and that they were on the cusp of being lost if I did not uphold my end of the bargain. So
Yeah.
it was plenty caffeine fueled days and sleepless nights. And then once we got the ball rolling,
Hmm. Yep.
I think, energy is infectious, whether positive or
Hmm.
negative.
Yep.
Once they saw that I was genuinely dedicated to doing this and the sacrifices I would make to make these happen, they also became genuinely dedicated and created sacrifices. And I had people just coming up, teachers that coming up with all these excellent ideas, and then we were able to kind of divide and conquer in that way.
Yep.
So thank you for acknowledging that because it was kind of tough. I
It
had some
sounds
people say,
scary to
"You did
me.
what? You're a year one principal." And I'm like, "Oh God, did I do too much?" But it has worked out well,
Yeah.
and that is one more thing I wanted to add was some of the teachers who really expressed to me how burnt out they were last spring when I came, and were
Hmm.
just kind of like, "Look, I'm on my last leg, but I like you. I'll give you a
Hmm.
shot. But if this doesn't work out, I'm gone." Some of those teachers who were just over it are now they've stepped up into like leadership roles, and they've come up with all these ideas to create different programs and clubs and things that have just spread like wildfire. So
Yeah.
it
They're
has
energized.
ignited that
Yeah.
in other people, and we have so much going on. It's crazy, but we're happy. It's the type of exhaustion that makes you feel fulfilled. So
Incredible. Well, I know you will, but keep it up.
thank you, thank you.
So wonderful. And thank you so much for joining the podcast and hope the rain moves on quickly.
Really appreciate it.